So I'm here today with John Cox, who is running for governor of our great state of California. Thanks for joining me, John.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thanks
for doing this.
Yeah, no problem. Obviously, we got an upcoming election, and you're making a bid for Republican nomination, which is fantastic. So the first question I want to ask you is, if you were to wave a magic wand, week one, what would be the, say, 3 or 4 or 5 things that you would do week one if you were elected governor?
Well, the first overriding theme of what I'm talking about, Bobby, is the corruption in Sacramento, and that corruption is basically a bunch of special interest funders who control everything in that city. And the result is that California has the highest taxes, the worst business climate, the highest cost of housing, energy, transportation. All these costs are piled on to the people of California. And what people in California need to realize is that a lot of that, in fact most of it, is a result of these special interest funders who have captured Sacramento. So the first and foremost thing I'm doing as a businessman, I'm attacking the cause of the problem and not dealing with the symptoms. I think most people in California are aware of the fact that the legislators up in Sacramento keep talking about giving subsidies out to people and keep writing checks to people. And
that's, money solves everything.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what they're doing is they're attacking the symptoms. They're making life in California virtually unaffordable for most middle-class people. Yeah. And the way they're remedying that is to take money from some people and give it to others. The trouble is that the people they're taking the money from aren't going to stick around for that. And many of them are buying houses. You know, you should move to Incline Village in Nevada and start selling houses, because a lot of people from here are buying houses there. Yeah. They're trying to make sure that they're not California residents. And, you know, this is what's happened in my home state of Illinois. Most people who have any kind of income have moved out. And so the number of people funding the government keeps dwindling down. And of course, what happens is then the government keeps going further into debt, which multiplies the tax increases, which multiplies the exodus. It's a viral or a spiral downward. How do we stop it? First of all, we've got to get rid of that special interest influence. I'm sponsoring a ballot initiative at the same time I'm running for governor. I won't get into the weeds on this ballot initiative. People just need to understand that it involves making all the districts really tiny so that you don't need money to run for office. And that takes away the power of the funders. So then we can get reform. Now what are the major things I'd address? Regulation. Regulation, regulation. I'm a small businessman like you. You're a real estate broker, I'm a broker, but I have an apartment business, small business. In California, regulations have resulted in the lowest number of new business formations in the last 20 years. And the best way to climb out of the lower class or the lower middle class and achieve middle class or upper middle class is to have your own business or to work in a small business. You know, most big businesses are cutting employees. The small businesses in California have really generated the growth, and they're being regulated to death. Okay, that's one thing. Obviously, that we also talk about the tax rates and the fees and the impact fees. I mean,
it's crazy the amount of money people are having to spend in taxes.
Oh, and the impact fees. You know, I mean, you're in the housing business, and I've talked to a bunch of real estate developers all over the state. All over the state, from Stockton to Fresno to LA, everywhere. And they tell me the fees and regulation, before they even turn a shovel of dirt to build a new house, the costs are $80,000, $100,000, almost $200,000 in some places per house before they even turn a shovel of dirt. So you can see that cost factor is driving up the cost.
Well, what people don't understand is that we end up paying that.
Exactly.
So it's all these fees that ends up impacting the person who's buying the property, you know, at the end of the day, because the builder has to raise the costs to an unaffordable level. And
what ends up happening then is that people have to move farther and farther away from their place of work in order to find some place they can afford. And of course, at the same time now, the legislature is driving up the cost of gasoline. I don't need to tell you. gas costs here are $3.30, $3.50 a gallon. Back in Illinois right now, I think you can buy gas for under $2 a gallon. So you're paying almost twice as much for gasoline in California. And so if you have to move an hour or two away from work in order to be able to afford someplace, now you're also then paying a higher gasoline cost in order to get to work. And that's driving the middle class into the lower middle class. You know, again, the bottom line is, what do we do about it? We've got to have a businessman who understands the causes of the problem. And we've got to have a solution to this special interest funding that I'm talking about in this race.
Okay. Some great answers, good
Yeah,
answers.
yeah.
So obviously Obamacare.
Healthcare.
Healthcare is a big issue. Obamacare
Sure.
has been a total disaster.
Yep.
Healthcare costs and premiums are way out of control. I actually just found out yesterday that Anthem is going to be out of California.
Right.
And so
Right.
for the second time in 3 or 4 years.
Another one bites the dust.
Yeah. For
Right.
my family, you know, we were supposed to not have to switch doctors, right?
Right.
That was the big thing that Obama
Right.
sold us on. So now, for the second time in 3 or 4 years, I'm going to have to switch doctors again because this one is leaving, unless I can get, you know, into the same network somehow. So, you know, what are some of the things that you're going to do in healthcare? What do you support?
Well, you're a real estate broker with Keller Williams. A great firm. I'll give you a shameless plug here, okay? Wouldn't you like to be the only real estate brokerage firm in this area?
That would be nice.
Wouldn't you like to have your commissions funded by government and dictated so that you could charge whatever you wanted, and all you had to do was have some political pull in order to get your commissions a lot higher? That would be serendipity for you.
Yeah.
You could eliminate your competition and assure that you get a nice price. Well, obviously, that wouldn't benefit the consumers.
Yeah.
The consumers would sit there and say, oh my God, I got to pay so much money and I don't have any say-so over it. I can't shop around. That's what's developed in healthcare. Because, you know, everybody needs healthcare. I mean, but I would submit to you, everybody needs food too. I mean, if you don't eat, you don't live long enough to get to the doctor, okay? So what we need to make sure is that healthcare is a competitive market, and you just mentioned that Anthem is leaving. There's only a couple of healthcare insurers that people have a choice of. And most of the people get their healthcare through their employer, which is another problem because they're not involved in the decision making as to who they go to. What I think we need to move to in California is a far more competitive environment. We need to have a lot more insurers, we need a lot more doctors, we need a lot more procedures that are done by nurses and other professionals. I mean, there's no reason a doctor, you know, or a nurse can't, you know, take samples and give you advice on things to be doing. There's something called telemedicine where you can actually talk to somebody on a video console and describe your symptoms and have them tell you what you should be doing at home in order to cure your issue. So the point of the matter is open up the competitive landscape. Now, my opponents running for governor have exactly the opposite view. I mean, their view, like Gavin Newsom, is single payer. I mean, let's make government the ultimate payer and distributor of all health care, and we'll have this nirvana where everybody will be covered and it'll be affordable. Well, not really, because what will end up happening is that companies will leave, or, you know, the people that will remain will be the ones that have political pull and get the most money. And we as consumers will suffer because we won't have the best choices and the best range of healthcare. So let's break down the licensing barriers. Let's allow more clinics and more hospitals to operate. I drive by street corners where there's a McDonald's, a Burger King, and a Wendy's in the same corner. Nobody ever complains about that being wasteful. They all three have French fryers and griddles.
Well, it's leading to the problem, you know, because people are eating this junk and then they get more sick.
Okay, but that aside, they're all duplicating, but they all race to be more efficient. They all offer special deals because they want to attract consumers. Shouldn't healthcare be the same way? Shouldn't they be offering deals, and shouldn't they be advertising the prices so that we can choose a healthcare provider? And isn't that going to get us a more efficient healthcare system? That's the kind of system that we need. I know healthcare is a lot more complicated than buying hamburgers. I understand all that, but I think consumers are smart enough to be able to make choices in healthcare, and that's the direction I'd go.
Well, it seems like the costs are just way through the roof.
Way through the roof.
I spent, I hurt my arm snowboarding a while back, and it cost me $1,000 to get an X-ray at a one of those urgent care places. The place was dead. There was nobody there. I walked in, get the X-ray. I was in and out within an hour. And it was $1,000.
$1,000. I mean, I've heard the horror stories. People go into emergency rooms even, and they get a bill for $3,000. And see, it wasn't relevant before when deductibles were down around $1,000 or $2,000 because, oh, you ate through that deductible pretty quickly and you didn't care. Now, it's the insurance.
$12,000 for a family.
Right, and all of a sudden you're footing the bill for a $3,000 emergency room. All of a sudden that hurts. You know, we've got to get the prices out in the public eye. We've got to be able to get price shopping and price discrimination on the part of consumers. We've got to get the consumer back in the picture, and that's going to undergo. We're going to have to have a sea change, and we're going to have to do this. And you know, there's going to be a transitional period. Now, I think we should maybe think. You know, there's a lot of people in the state on Medi-Cal. 14 million people are now on Medi-Cal because of the escalation of costs. I think we need to bring the cost down, but again, we do that through competition. I'd like to give vouchers out to a lot of those people where they have to put in a piece for themselves, but they also get maybe a voucher, and then have those vouchers gradually going downwards so that people then are more involved in the decision. As that happens and people then discriminate on price, I think we find prices actually going down for a lot of these services, and we'd find insurance costs moderating. As we find insurance costs moderating, I think we'd have more insurers come into this market. This is a great market. California is a wonderful, productive state, so I think we could get a lot more insurance here.
Largest economy in the world.
Actually, now it's trending toward fifth.
Oh wow.
Fifth. So I mean, it's a big economy. Oh yeah.
Let's shift to real estate. As a real estate broker, you know, I see firsthand the issues of, you know, people don't have enough housing, whether it be rentals or whether it be, you know, purchasing. You know, we're seeing a huge decline in homeownership rates. Now you have corporations coming in and buying up rental properties for cash and putting renters in there. So that, you know, there's a whole shift going on. And so, what would you do to make it more affordable and kind of ease the pain for a lot of these people who are, like you said earlier, getting pushed out to the outerlining areas? And I know a lot of people moving out of the state, moving to Oregon, moving to Colorado, moving to all these other states. Less taxes, less regulation, more jobs. You know, so it's, you know, what would you do to try and ease that?
And businesses are moving out of the state because their employees find they can't afford to live here, and they can get twice the house for half the cost in Texas or Arizona or someplace. It's all about affordability again, Bobby, and what we've got to do, again, government can't force affordability, and subsidies don't work. What we need to do is more supply. And also reduce the regulations, because again, as I said, the cost of those regulations and those impact fees and all the agencies end up in the price of every house. So it's got to be a combination of affordability through reducing these costs and these fees, and streamlining regulation. I can't emphasize enough, you know, to get a development approved around here. I mean, we're here now in San Diego County. You're dealing with 10 different agencies, you know, and they're all
2-3 years of red tape just to even get to where, you know, you can get a decision.
And in the housing industry, just like in every other industry, time is money, because you've got the cost of funds. I mean, no matter what, even in an era of low interest rates, you've got to have a return on your investment while you're holding that cash or while you have that investment in the real estate. And of course, the cost of lawyers, the cost of consultants, and that all ends up being the cost of every house. And so, you know, the more agencies you have, the other attitude I'm finding, I talk to businesses all over the state, is that the agencies often act like, you know, they're doing you a favor. You know, like you work for them. Not the other way around.
Customer service is just completely out the window.
Gone in the government realm. And you know, I've been in the private sector my whole career. You know, my career has been based upon service and competition.
So
but
basically, you're a little bit of an outsider, but you've also held some positions and you've been a part of public office.
So I mean, I think you need to inject that private sector service orientation, that private sector competitive matrix in the government. And and I'm running against, there's 5 other candidates running for governor, they're all politicians. They're all married to the political system. They don't want to change it, they love it.
They're profiting off of it. So why would you want to change it?
Why would you change something you're making a good living off of? Exactly right. But it's got to change because life in California is becoming unaffordable and unattainable for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, this is obviously going to be a huge issue for you. Is the illegal immigrants in this country? Or in
the state especially.
The state is really being overrun by undocumented workers.
Right.
You know, I'm a first-generation immigrant. My parents came here the right way through, through the proper channels years ago, and so for me, I look at all of these people coming here, and they're not documented. They're not paying taxes. They're not they're just basically mooching off of our system, and Jerry Brown is basically just kind of let him do it. Just here you go. Let's it's a safe haven state and all this. I would imagine you're going to be a little bit different than where his stance is. So maybe you can tell us kind of where you fall in all of this.
I'm in the private sector. I have to obey the law. And businesses that bring in undocumented workers and use them to undercut existing workers here aren't doing all of us any favors. I mean, they're making, again, it more impossible to live in California because as a business, you'd love to be able to hire a whole workforce that was going to work for less than anybody who was here. But is that fair?
Yeah.
That's just not fair at all. Now, in certain industries, we need workers maybe, and if we have a need for temporary workers to give them a temporary permit, like in picking crops or other things like that, let's think about doing that. But we better have a demonstrative need and know that that's the case. But I mean, I know some builders that just bring in crews of drywallers and stuff from Mexico, and they're willing to work for less.
Yeah.
And let's face it, the reason for that is because Mexico is a corrupt economy. The government there is corrupt. Business investment in Mexico is ridiculously low because the government's corrupt. We don't have millions of people streaming over the northern border from Canada to take jobs here. I mean, that's a 3,000-mile unprotected border, and
there's no problems for the most part.
Yeah, because the Canada government, they get business investment and they have a functioning economy. I mean, we're not doing the people of Mexico any favor allowing this unfettered illegal immigration along with the drug traffic. So I agree with the president. Shut down this stream of people. We got a problem because we got a whole bunch of people who are here and they've had kids who are now American citizens. So what are we going to deal with that? Well,
I mean, that's going to be a huge issue.
A huge issue.
Millions of people in our state.
And like a lot of businessmen, we got to come up with a solution that doesn't involve stormtroopers going door to door. The first thing I think is to make sure that people who have a job are legally here and are legally on the books. We can not have some businesses employing legal employees and keeping them on the books while other ones get escape free. So I'm sorry, and I'll direct this to the Wall Street Journal because they don't want to make businesses the regulator, but you got to make sure businesses obey the law. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, you can't have some that obey the law and some that don't.
That's like a contractor, having unlicensed, contractors working for them, doing all this work that then, find out that, they didn't have a license to do what they were doing, like if it was a plumber or something like that. So that's it's a big problem. What about a wall? Do you support the wall?
Well, a wall's worked in San Diego. I mean, we had craziness going on. Again, the problem is that Mexico is this unregulated, corrupt. I think this year is going to set a record for the number of murders. I mean, the last thing I want, if I have a ranch in Tucson, or if I have a home along, in Chula Vista, the last thing I want is a stream of, drug dealers and criminals coming across the border. So I think in certain areas a wall's going to make sense. I mean, other areas a virtual wall may make more sense. I mean, 1,000 miles of the Texas border is Rio Grande River. Where are you going to put the wall? You're going to put it in the middle of the river? Are you going to put it on our side or their side? You can't put it on their side. That's their territory, right? So, a virtual wall may be.
Like cameras, every so often,
a virtual wall so you can see it. But again, the big problem is people aren't going to come streaming over if we arrest them for selling drugs, and we don't let them work illegally. I mean, that's the best way to prevent this problem.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Enforce the law.
I agree. So there's been a lot of talk about climate change lately,
Yep.
and you know, obviously we had some record droughts, and you know, thankfully the drought is, I guess, over. But where do you fall with climate change?
Okay, well, let's talk about climate change and water, because those are two very important issues in California. You know, I remember growing up in Chicago, I could barely see skyscrapers because of the haze. I mean, I'm happy that that's no longer the case in Chicago, and it pretty much is no longer the case in Los Angeles. You know, there's a couple of days. So I'm a big proponent of the environment. I think every conservative is, and frankly, every human being is. I mean, we all want clean air, we all want clean water. The issue is the balance. I think the thing that people mostly see in this debate is a lot of cronyism and a lot of corruption. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of people who make money from these green sources and renewables. You know, they have these big investments, and I don't think there should be cronyism with fossil fuel companies either. Again, I'm the one that's proposing a different political system that takes the corruption and the campaign contributions out, and that's from big oil as well as big renewables.
Yeah.
Let's get a good debate going here. I mean, so far, by the way, the proposals you see out of the legislature are usually proposals to raise in a humongous way the cost of energy, and then of course the politicians get to redistribute that extra cost, and they give it to their favorite cronies, and the public ends up taking the pipe. You know, we end up paying with higher gasoline costs and things, higher cost of electricity and the like. So let's figure out a good balance to do this. You know, nuclear power is the cleanest power around. Now it's got a waste problem, but there are new technologies that allow the waste, you know, nuclear waste to be reused and reused and reused down to its, you know, to a little thimbleful. And so, you know, we've got to look at those kinds of technologies to really make sure that we both clean the environment but have an energy future. Water is another big issue. It's not so much in Southern California here because, you know, we're not farmers, but the Central Valley, you know, it's the breadbasket of the world, but it's also fruit, nuts, dairy, cattle. I mean, and the agricultural industry in California dwarfs Hollywood. That is a surprise.
That is a surprise
to most people. You know, if you measure it by media attention, you know, Hollywood is obviously far greater. But, you know, the agricultural industry employs a ton of people, produces a lot of foreign exchange, a lot of exports, and a lot of the economy. California, you know, Southern California especially is a drought prone area. I mean, it's a desert. You know, San Diego is a desert on the ocean. We wouldn't have anything here if it wasn't for irrigation. So we got to make sure that we keep a water distribution system intact. The trouble is, a lot of the political contributions over the last 20, 30 years have come from environmental groups who want us to kind of return to the Stone Age a little bit. You know, they don't want fossil fuels, they don't want a lot of the things that we've come to enjoy. There's a balance, and we need to build more reservoirs. We're always going to have periods of drought in California. If you look at the past 200 years, there's periods of drought followed by some big amount of rain. Guess what? It happened last year. We had the biggest snowmelt in the history here this summer, and a large part of it's going to get flushed into the Pacific and not in reservoirs. And because we've taken... It's mismanagement. It's mismanagement. I mean, if this were a business, we would have fired the managers long ago, and obviously that's what I'm proposing to do in 2018. We need to build some reservoirs. We need to make sure those reservoirs don't disturb fish and wildlife, or do it in as little as possible, that there's a balance associated with it. But we got to make sure that humans have the water they need to live and grow. So I think there's a way to do that. We've got to tackle the infrastructure deficit in this state. The Oroville Dam was a wake-up call. You know, all you have to do is look at the thousands of boards and commissions in California that waste money. You have to look at the salaries and pensions in this state that are excessive. I mean, go to a website called transparentcalifornia.com. If you ever want your blood pressure elevated, If you got low blood pressure, go to the Transparent California website. You'll see dentists at our correctional center making $700,000 a year.
Wow.
A dentist making now I love dentists. I mean, I go regularly to get my teeth cleaned. $700,000.
Are they giving the prison inmates new veneers?
I think so. I mean, or maybe they're getting gold fillings. I don't know what this deal is, but 700, and it's not just one.
Oh, they must be taking the mercury out.
Maybe that's what it is. That's what it is, because we
Yeah.
wouldn't want prisoners to have mercury in their fillings.
Yeah.
And then staff psychiatrists. I mean, one after another, 400,000, 500,000. Registered nurses. I mean, we love nurses, right? Registered nurses making 100,000 in base salary with $200,000 in overtime.
Oh wow.
Fire captains. We love the fire.
Why not hire more nurses and get rid of the overtime?
Well, that's what a business would do.
Yeah. Why
right?
not do that?
Because overtime isn't pensionable. But salaries are. So
it's cheaper.
They make the leap that it's easier. Well, but that only works to a certain degree. If you're paying a firefighter, you know, $60,000 and he's getting $150,000 in overtime at time and a half, you might be able to add another firefighter at $60,000 and still, even with the pensions, come up with a lower cost.
Yeah.
But of course, that ignores the elephant in the room, and that is the pensions. As you might know, firefighters and police in this state get to retire after 30 years on 90% of their salary.
Wow.
Now, there's two problems with that. One, first of all, you know, you start at the police department when you're 22, all of a sudden you're 52 and you've earned your full pension. You've earned, you know, 30 years times 3%, 90%. You retire at 90% of your pay, you go to work for somebody else, you're still collecting almost your entire pay, and you get another salary. That's nirvana.
Yeah.
The trouble is you got to replace that police officer. And how are you going to do that? That's another burden on the taxpayers.
You're still paying 90%. Yeah. That's not a recipe for success.
That is unsustainable. and the other problem, Bobby, is that senior citizens like me, I'm 62, okay, I qualify as a senior now from the movies. You know, I refuse to die. I'm hopefully going to live until I'm 90 years old. I'm keeping myself in shape.
Well, I see you walking out there playing golf. You know,
I walk the golf course every time. And why? Because I want to stay around. Well, our retirees are doing this too. And so if government is guaranteeing them this pension for life, and they refuse to die, guess what? That lengthens the time we're paying this, which is another burden on the taxpayers. So these promises are really unsustainable, and frankly,
how do you get the unions on board to take less though?
Well, you can't under the current system. Because under the current system, the unions put the politicians in office. That's the problem. And of course, they'll make the argument that big banks and big oil and big pharma and big telecommunications do the same thing. I agree. My answer is get rid of all of them, get them out of the political sphere, make our politicians beholden to nobody except
the people,
the voters. And that's what the neighborhood legislature is all about. And so I urge people
talk a little bit more about that, because I don't think a lot of people know about it. So go ahead.
It's not as well understood, and it takes a few minutes. First of all, what it does is it takes these large legislative districts in California. I mean, California has the absolute largest districts in the world. Our Constitution was drafted.
Aren't they pretty crazy? They're like all.
Oh, they're gerrymandering. And you can do a lot of gerrymandering and creative drafting when you've got 1 million people in a district. That's what a state senate district is like. Now think about it. If you're going to run a race to 1 million people, what do you need a lot of?
Money.
Money. And the unions and big business are all too happy to give you that money if you'll do what they want. The neighborhood legislature attacks the problem a little differently. It takes those big districts and chops them into 100 little tiny ones so that you get 100 people per big district. But only one of those people goes to Sacramento. The other 99 stay home.
Are they paid?
They get $1 a year.
Okay.
They're basically volunteers.
So volunteers, okay.
But what they do is they keep tabs on the one person that went to Sacramento.
Okay.
So you're still sending only 120 people to Sacramento, and the people in Sacramento then do all the work in terms of drafting legislation. They have to get it ratified by the 99 people who stayed home. And you can do that over the internet, you know. It's with mass communication and the technology we have today.
It seems like we're not using it to some extent in government. I mean,
not a bit.
And healthcare. You know, like, you know, we should all have, you know, medical records. Everything should be all online.
Well, you're using it in the real estate business.
We are. Yeah.
You are. You have virtual tours of properties.
Yeah.
You sign real estate contracts
with DocuSign.
DocuSign remotely. You're using technology. You're absolutely right. Politics is the only place, and the reason is because there's this huge money game in Sacramento, and they don't want it disturbed.
They don't want it changed. Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%.
And the neighborhood legislature, people outside the political arena, like Art Laffer, the Laffer curve, have said it's the answer for saving California. I mean, it's gotten a lot of interest from a lot of people. We've done university symposiums, and people say, wow, what a great idea. How do we get it done? And the trouble is the politicians don't want it. They like the current system.
Well, it sounds like we need to vote for you for governor to get it done.
Well, I'm making it a big issue.
That'll be a big step in the right direction.
There's two big issues. There's my business experience, and there's the cleanup of the reform in Sacramento, and I'm going to try to do both in this governor's race.
Excellent, excellent.
People have a choice.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this next question, but gun control has obviously been something that has been talked about a lot in the state and in the country. Do you support the Second Amendment?
I'm a life member of the NRA, so you know I certainly support the right of Americans to defend themselves. You know, it's a fact of life. I mean, we've got 300 million plus guns. You know, more laws like the ammunition limit, you know, that Mr. Newsom put on. I mean, why does a criminal care about that? I mean, a criminal by his nature is not obeying the law, right? So do they care about another law? And what that does is it occupies our time. There's only so much time our district attorneys have and our police officers have. So I don't want them to be distracted one iota from going after criminals. And let me just address one other thing, and that is we passed a proposition in the state that was going to get people out of prisons and into the general population. And one of the reasons for that proposition was because it's so costly. You know, there was a court order that required more prison space, but it was because it was so costly. It now costs $75,000 a year to house a prisoner for a year.
It's amazing.
And the trouble is that means we're letting drug dealers and other people out on the street. We're getting them out of these prisons, and it's I worry about that. I worry about the increase in crime that results from that. I mean, I don't believe in incarcerating drug users, but I certainly believe in going after drug dealers and people who would break the law.
On the topic of drugs, do you support legal marijuana?
I support the medical marijuana. I think that's a good thing. I'm troubled by the sale of marijuana per se. I mean, I think, I have a young daughter, 12 years old. I mean, I don't want her getting the message that there's another legal drug. I don't want to incarcerate users. I'm not in favor of going after marijuana users and tying up our courts and our court system. But I also don't go to full legality as far as that goes. I know Mr. Newsom loves that issue. It got him a lot of money in his campaign coffers. I worry about the effect on our children.
It's going to be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, I was just in Colorado. There's mixed results. The revenue that they've generated isn't all that much. The number of car accidents has seemed to blip up. And obviously drunk driving is still a huge problem, and we need to crack down on that too.
But potato chip sales are skyrocketing.
I love potato chips. As you would mention, I used to own a potato chip company, so I love potato chips. That's a legal drug, by the way. It's definitely legal.
I love it. So recently there was a gas tax hike.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that? And in conjunction with that, Do you support the bullet train that Jerry Brown has supported?
Well, people think that that was a gas tax increase. It was really a pension tax because,
okay.
you know, listen, the state budget is $180 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
You certainly can think that they could find $5 billion to spend on roads. They basically provided nothing for roads in that budget. So then they had to come along and pass a gas tax. Well, the reason is because the budget is putting so much money in pensions.
Okay.
They didn't provide anything in roads, so they could come along later and hit us for another gasoline tax. I mean, the problem that they're ignoring is resolving the pension problem.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that circles back to this political contribution issue that I told you about. So we got to attack the pension issue in order to get all these other costs down. And we absolutely need a lot of work done on our roads.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's true.
That budget is humongous, and there's certainly way more than enough money. And the other problem with the roads is there's no reform of Caltrans. Caltrans spends 4.5 times what Texas spends to fix a mile of road.
Wow.
4.5 times.
Now, is that because of lack of competition for the jobs?
It's corruption.
So, okay.
Project labor agreements that drive up the cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that we don't outsource. Caltrans has numbers of people on their staff, and so if there's a temporary lull, we're still paying the people.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of states outsource their engineers, their designers, their contractors, so that the private sector bears that cost. And of course, the inefficiency of government is legion in this state. You know, a lot of other states use private-public partnerships. Well, given the union control of Sacramento, you're not going to get much of that done.
Yeah.
So, you know, these are all business-oriented ideas that I intend to bring to the governorship.
I love it. I love it. So, what would you do as governor to bring jobs, in particularly higher paying jobs in California? Because that's something that's, you know, obviously, if we're going to sustain this economy, we need those types of jobs here.
And you need them for more houses to sell. We need them for, you know, a vibrant economy. Well, you know, the business climate here is the worst.
There's so much regulation. There's so much
taxes, the fees,
everything.
All the government agencies we talked about already. You know, California has been rated for 13 years in a row by CEO Magazine as 50 out of 50, the worst state to do business. Maybe that's why we're interested in having Puerto Rico come in as a state. You know, maybe they would be 51.
But if that's the case, then why are we now going to be the 5th largest economy? Is it just in spite of all of this?
We have a wonderful climate that attracts the best and brightest minds. I mean, we have Silicon Valley, we have the biomedical industry here in San Diego, we have Hollywood, and obviously the agriculture industry is still, you know, functioning, even though not as strongly as it was. You know, we have a lot of assets in this state, but we could be even better. And again, this business climate has to change, and a lot of that is due to the regulation, and a lot of that is due to not having a business mindset in Sacramento. We need to, you know, slash a lot of this regulation and coordinate it so there's one agency, you know, that works with businesses to get things accomplished. Oh, the other thing I have to mention is the trial lawyers. I mean, I'm a lawyer myself. I'm a CPA and a lawyer. That's my background. But the trial lawyers have free rein in the state. Businesses have to perform their work defensively. I mean, it's all about avoiding suits, you know, and the trial lawyers can mount any number of frivolous lawsuits. And other states like Texas have gone to loser pays. Japan and the UK have loser pays. And, you know, they haven't fallen apart. I think that's something that we should think about for this, you know, for our state to make ourselves competitive. The trial lawyers will scream bloody murder.
Oh yeah, they won't like that one bit.
Not a bit, no. And of course, you know, listen, I wouldn't want that competition either if I were them. But I think we got to put an end to these frivolous lawsuits.
It's ridiculous.
We all pay the cost of them.
Yeah.
And the trial lawyers make a fortune.
So let's say you become the governor, and now we're talking at the end of your term. You leave office. Maybe you don't go for a second term. Maybe you do. But what would your legacy be? What do you want to really accomplish as governor?
I think truly it is putting the people back in charge. I mean, getting rid of this corrupt system. I mean, if you took a look at our system, Bobby, from 30,000 feet, you'd say people who want something from government provide the funding and the people to get the politicians elected who make those decisions. You couldn't have designed a more corrupt system. I mean, it's nuts. We've got to be able to do something about it. If I can awaken this spirit in California to return government to the people, I think it could sweep the country. I think states like Illinois, New York, New Jersey would also look at this as a way of getting themselves a better, opportunity climate. Frankly, the U.S. Congress needs this kind of reform as well. So, the legacy I'd like to have is that I started a peaceful revolution of voters. This is not about breaking windows. This is about looking at the political system and saying, if we just tweaked it a little bit, if we just went to this small little tiny district thing and then a working committee, there's a way to do this so that we get better, more responsive, more efficient government. We don't do away with government. We need government for sure, but it's a way to get it so that it's not as corrupt and not as inefficient, and that's what I'd like my legacy to be.
Sounds excellent. Well, hopefully you will win, and you can put our great state back on the right track. And so thank you for watching this video, and make sure you go to John's website, johncoxforgovernor.com. And also the companion site would be neighborhoodlegislature.com. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today, and have a great day.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
That was fun.